All right, y'all. Welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shaunna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And I am here with Dr. Lisa. And I have to say, Lisa, I usually try to see what the weather is on your end of the world. But I was the one that had to send a heads up to Dr. Lisa to say, hey,
Yep,
we're in
yep.
the middle of a windstorm and some other things. So let's just pray that my property that has trees wrapped around it is all good and that the Wi-Fi holds up so that we can talk to you all. So far, so good. You know, the sun is out and the wind is relatively calm. But what's going on in your corner of the world there, Lisa?
Hi, everyone. Pronoun she, hers. Not a whole lot. Big snowstorm, unexpected snowstorm yesterday. So,
Oh, how much? How much?
not a lot, couple of inches, but I wasn't
Okay.
even expecting that. So it snowed for like 4 hours, and
Hmm.
I'm over it.
Underwhelming.
Yeah, but I'm just like, bring on spring, people, bring on spring.
Hello. Oh my God. Yes, please.
Yeah.
As much as I hate the allergies and all that other stuff in the spring, it's got to be better than,
Hmm.
we've had shovelable, is that a word? Shovelable snow at least 3 times now. So enough is enough. I'm tired. I'm tired here in
Yep.
Maryland.
I'm tired.
So,
Yep.
All right. Well, let's get into the word of the week. And let me say, Lisa, you and I, we just like data, we love our words as well. We love data, we
Hmm.
love words, all that good stuff. And I was reading an article that we're going to get into in the first phase. But as I was reading that article, a word jumped off the page to me, if you will, that isn't
Hmm.
used frequently. And I thought we should bring this up for our listeners. But this word is gender expansive, gender expansive. And it's a umbrella term that's used for individuals that broaden their own culture's commonly held definitions of gender, including expectations around gender expression, identities, gender roles, and or other perceived gender norms. And so I really thought it was important for us to bring this up because, again, we're always trying to break people out of the binary thinking with most identities that we bring up on this podcast, Lisa. And so
Right. Right.
I thought that gender expansive would be a great term to just lift up, knowing that, we talk about transgender, non-binary identities, as well as uh, anyone whose gender in some way seems to be stretching what seems to be quote unquote normal. And I hate to say normal because I don't like that. But
Hmm.
gender norms, the norms of society, even. And so, with that, what may be gender expansive in the US
Hmm.
may not be gender expansive in other cultures,
Right. Right.
And so, just thinking about all that, Lisa. But have you heard gender expansive often? Because I've heard it before, but not often.
I have heard it before, but I haven't heard it like I've never heard a person identify themselves as gender expansive. So
Oh,
it
uh-huh. Yeah,
feels
yeah.
like it might be more of a journalistic or an academic term
Mm-hmm.
as a catch-all. And
Mm-hmm.
I know
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of several years ago, um, trans was written with an asterisk and to be
Oh.
encompassing of all different trans identities. So it would be like trans and then the asterisk. And that fell out of
Mm-hmm.
favor because it was minimizing, similar to how we might think about people of color or BIPOC as a term.
Yes,
And
yes.
so I wonder
Mm.
similarly if this gender expansive terminology to be the umbrella of all of these non-normative gender identities will fall the same way, right?
Mm-hmm.
In
Mm-hmm.
that it's just this easy bucket that we can refer to when we're not being precise enough. So I will be curious to see if it
Oh.
continues its usage, especially now.
Yeah, that's a great point because the pushback that we've seen and heard from, for example, the acronym BIPOC is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I even saw one just this week that it was a Black woman who is pretty prolific in social media. And she corrected some folks to say, no, when I said Black women, I meant Black women. I did not mean BIPOC. I did not mean people of color. I meant specifically, she said specifically Blackity Black women. That's what she said. And she's a comedian as well. But I got it, at that point,
Yeah.
because, sometimes we are referring to everyone in the BIPOC acronym. And then sometimes we're just being lazy and we throw it out there. And so I've been attempting
Yeah.
not to be as lazy with my language and just being specific as possible. So thought it would be a good
Yeah.
word to bring up here, Lisa.
Yeah.
So.
Great. Great.
Mhm. All right, so let's get into phase one. And I have to say that as we're recording, Lisa, we are kind of at the end of, well, we're in Women's History Month, but we're beyond Black History Month and we're behind LGBT History Month, both of which happened in February. But there's been quite a few things in the news that have come up. We mentioned this before that unfortunately a VA patient died by suicide in Syracuse by hanging from the top of the hospital garage structure. There's several levels to it, obviously. And what was most disturbing was that the person very intentionally wrapped their body inside a body length trans pride flag. Very disturbing, y'all. But now, more recently, another story that was brought to my attention by a colleague of mine that is a trans man. The story is also about a trans man, Sam Nordquist, who was traveling to New York to meet an online girlfriend. And this person, unfortunately, their remains were discovered on February 13th. And it was clear based on what they found that there had been ongoing physical abuse sometime between the dates of December 2024 into February 2025. And so now the 5 people that we will see, I know we're innocent until proven guilty in this country, but the 5 ranging from ages 19 to 38 are now being held in Ontario County Jail without bail. And this is the article, Lisa, where I saw the language of transgender or gender expansive. And so that's why I thought it was important to lift up this week. But as of 2023, there were 35 homicides of transgender or gender expansive people. And I was grateful for the council members of Ontario County specifically saying, quote, our trans and LGBTQIA plus residents are and have always been integral to the fabric of our communities. What's, again, sad for me is obviously the loss of life. And when I think about broadly how flippant those of us outside of the trans community sometimes treat words and language and communication as if it's not a life and death situation for these groups when it actually is. So it kind of goes back to that phrase when I was a kid, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And I'm like, bullshit, bullshit on all that. And so, it's just very disheartening knowing that it cast a major shadow on our trans youth and just the entire transgender community. So I'll stop there. My heart goes out to the entire trans community. Lisa, let me just be very clear that there's been a couple of times where I was accused on social media of being transphobic, yet I never tooted my horn to say that there's been many dollars that I've put into, for example, the Transgender Law Center and certain nonprofit organizations that will hold these 5 people to task. I try not to toot my own horn around any of that, but I am saying it right now because I'm hoping anybody that hears this episode of the podcast will consider donating to make sure that, God forbid, I hope these instances don't happen again. But if and when they do, people are held to task because I'm also about accountability, Lisa. So I'll stop there. My heart breaks, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, Lambda Legal is another entity that you could donate to, folks, if you're listening and want to provide funding for legal support around trans issues, but also in this case, holding these folks accountable. Although I don't know that Lambda Legal is directly involved in this case, but rather they provide legal services. I just think this is violence against trans people is not new. Obviously, it's been happening for generations, but it has taken a significant turn for the worse since Donald Trump won the election, since his administration has come in. There was actually a study that was released at the end of 2024 that showed a causal connection between the increase in anti-trans bills nationally and transgender youth and their suicidality or attempted suicides. So that we'll put a link in the show notes to that study if folks are interested, but it directly connects the increase in those laws with an increase in transgender suicide attempts. And I just, we are in the middle of this ongoing attempt to erase trans people from existence. Whether it's the executive order. And I mean, even a few weeks ago, the National Park Service removed the term transgender from the Stonewall Museum, which is the kind of birthplace, if you will, of the gay rights movement in the 1960s and 1970s. There was a riot there, and transgender people were integral in terms of pushing back against explicit over policing and the ways in which the gay and lesbian and transgender community were intimidated and harassed, right? And now their role in that really pivotal moment has been removed because of a fear from the National Park Service that they will lose funding for historic sites such as this. And it's just to your point, the connection between the use of words and rhetoric and actions and the increase in violence against the trans community is it's just so self-evident. And I just find it to be mind-blowing how you can be so hateful of another person and who they are that you are willing to just say they don't exist, which is a violence in and of itself, right? It's not a physical violence. But the whole passport thing and people being dead named and transgender women being moved from cisgender women's prisons to cis men or male prisons, right? I mean, I know that got stopped by a court order, but and the military piece. I mean, it's just I'm not surprised, Shaunna. That this administration is pushing this agenda. I mean, it was in Project 2025. It's been a target for a long time. But when you tell me about these experiences of trans people who are dying by suicide or who are being brutally murdered and abused, there's the result. There's the result, right? Young people are dying by suicide at greater rates because of this climate.
Yes, exactly. That's why, folks, if you're looking at your social media, you may see things like a trans flag that says, trans youth, the world is a better place with you in it. That's the reason why, is because of these very clear causalities between words and the livelihood of trans youth. And then I want to go back to Lisa. Let me share with you something that my trans friend educated me on that I wasn't aware of until a few years ago. So I too thought that Stonewall, even though it's extremely important and it's ridiculous that language is being scrubbed, and at the same time, Compton's cafeteria preceded the Stonewall riot about 3 years before.
Okay.
And so Compton's cafeteria, interestingly enough, and forgive me for the dusty historical reference, but Compton's cafeteria would literally have police being called on transgender customers because folks were saying, management was saying that, oh, well, they're loitering and causing them to lose business. And so when they would not leave, they would in fact be charged a service fee. Just the transgender individuals were
Okay.
charged a service fee, hopefully getting them to leave, but many of them kept paying, right? And their crime, female impersonation, especially for the drag queens specifically. And so, we usually, Lisa, you and I, we refer to some of the police brutality that's specifically targeted to the African American community, which holds true. But at the same time, we have to bring up San Francisco Police Department's targeting of drag queens and the trans community during that time as well. So police brutality isn't just directed at one minoritized group here. And so given that, look at this long, rich intersectional history
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
now coming down to young people's lives being in existence. My heart breaks, and I have friends, Lisa, I don't know if you do, but I do have a number of my social media friends, real life friends, who have trans kids, and
Yeah.
seeing all this, hearing all this, experiencing all this is extremely triggering for them. And so with that, I just want people to be aware and hold things in mind that given this, again, string of homicide, suicide, the odds are usually not great when it comes to these communities, Lisa. And so I just want to lift them up in our awareness here. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we're talking about this, because I think this is just going to be an ongoing conversation in terms of our activism and vigilance over the
Yes.
next 4 years. And for folks
Yes.
who have gender privilege, right, who are
Yes.
not being targeted, it's really important that you are doing your part here to
Yes.
push back on these
Yes.
really problematic policies and perspectives and narratives, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Let's go into phase 2. I'm looking out my window here for the YouTubers because there's a family walking around my little cul-de-sac,
Oh,
and I was
yeah?
like, are the dogs gonna go completely wild at the
Well,
sight? So,
they are like co-hosts on this podcast anyway, so who cares, right? Go
yes.
for it. Yes.
Yes. So, okay. So I think we are through the barking risk right now. So let's move on to phase 2. So this is something that you and I have talked about a number of times, offline and online, is around white women's capacity to be effective, trustworthy, loud allies to Black women in particular, but women of color more broadly. And so there's, this is still really salient, I think, as we are entering this time where any person of color, any woman, any person with disabilities, their capacity, experience, credibility for jobs or positions that they hold is just immediately in question, based on those oppressed identities, because surely they can't have just gotten those roles on the merit. So I just see wanting to revisit this, and wanting to revisit particularly the discomfort that white women feel when confronted directly by women of color about the pain that they experience and the historic ways in which white women have failed women of color, Black women in particular, leading to a lack of trust. Now, you and I have talked about the fact that you operate from a space of, I don't trust you. You are going to have to earn it. Whereas I go in with that kind of a baseline level of trust that you will then lose. Right. And so a whole different we've had that conversation around that orientation and how that's racially connected. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are in this current climate related to that, specifically the confrontation of white women around, this is my lived experience, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't seem to
Mm-hmm.
be understanding why I can't trust you, even if I like you, you know?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and so let's go to that trust piece of things in that we just talked about not thinking in binaries about the trans community and gender expansive community. Same thing here. I wouldn't necessarily put white women in either I trust you or I don't categories either. There's even a gradation of that, right? So for example, there might be white women where it's like, absolutely not. I don't know you, I don't trust you. That's it. You're starting at 0%, right? But then there's other white women that I'm like, they about 85-90% trust. Yes. And even the expectation of the 85-90% is like, now they're human, so they can fall off, they can make mistakes ever so often, but this is going to be probably the highest percentage that a white woman can get in a black woman's life. And I'm cool with that, right? But that may have taken years of experience, connection, understanding, et cetera.
Right.
So
Right.
I do think that there's more than just the binary. There are gradations of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, what I think is interesting when it came to a number of clips where I've seen Black women, other women of color, um, attempt to have these conversations with white women,
Mm-hmm.
the again, it is so tough for white women to decenter themselves, their
Yeah.
feelings, and their comfort, right? Like it makes me sad that like I have heard white women say that to me so many times. It makes me sad that you feel this way. Well, you might be sad, but how is that relevant to this conversation right now? Right? Like, or Lisa, we have had countless conversations about the
Mm-hmm.
boys. So let's say that, I need to have the Freddie Gray or George Floyd conversation with my boys.
Mm-hmm.
And then a white woman says back to me, it makes me sad. It makes me sad that you have to have that conversation. It's like, I'm talking about another dead black kid, and you're talking about it makes you, white woman, sad. You missed the whole point, right? And I'm not saying
Mm.
that as a human being, she should not be sad. That's not what I'm saying. But if your first thought is, I feel this way about your experience versus you must be trying to grasp for the words to talk to your sons that look like the victims of these experiences. Like even the
Yeah.
gradation in the language tells me
Mm-hmm.
that I need to recalibrate my expectations because if I'm having this conversation with a white woman who literally has never been challenged to decenter herself, it is a skill that you must learn. And if you've never been put in a situation to learn it, then how is it even fair for me to even bring up this conversation with you? And so then you see black women check out because it's like,
Yeah.
nope, I'm not having this conversation with you because you're not even capable of having this conversation with me. I think both sides are
Mm-hmm.
valid.
Yeah, I mean, I think the in that specific example, I think the kind of impetus there is empathy, right? Like I can
Yeah, yeah,
feel how painful that must be for you, and so I am expressing an awareness of that, right? But it's um misses the point because rather than say, Shaunna, how was that for you? I imagine that must have
yes,
been really, really hard to find the words. It's like,
yes.
gosh, I'm really sad. I'm really sad that
Mm-hmm.
you have to do that. Which is also
Mm-hmm.
it's also a distancing. There's a distancing in that too, right? Like I'm
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
really sad that you have to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
that's not I'm not responsible for the fact that you have to do that. I'm just sorry that you have to do that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
I do think the empathy is there, but I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's an interesting way to think about it, how white women have been, um, you know, socialized to be
Yeah.
caring and understanding and empathetic and sympathetic. And so that's maybe the initial reaction
Mm-hmm.
is to express that level of empathy or sympathy
Yeah, yeah.
rather than, but it's still, you're right, it totally still centers themselves. Um, and the
And
discomfort piece. Yeah. Go ahead.
I've
Sorry.
seen it where no, 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 I cut you off. I'm sorry. Um, I I'm recalling a time where this is one of many moments, y'all, where Shaunna's ready to turn over tables. You know, there's a parable about Jesus being upset and he turns over a table because he's so pissed off, right? There's been several times where I've been pissed off enough to get to that point and walk out. And one of them was when I was I was working at a university where there was my boss's boss was an African American woman. She brings in a African American male facilitator to do some difficult dialogue facilitation and some reconciliation conversations. And there was a white woman in that room that was confronted about her white comfort and behavior. And this was clearly not the first time I've witnessed it, but another time where I've witnessed a white woman cry that her feelings about Black women were not accepted. And I literally got up and left when my Black female supervisor handed a white woman a tissue to wipe her tears after a Black woman just shared her pain. I got up
Mm,
and left the meeting. That was problematic for me because I didn't have the language for it then, because this has been many years ago. I didn't have the language to express that a white woman's comfort and a white woman's tears were used as a weapon when the real victim happened to be someone else. But it was not that white woman. And so now, whenever a white woman cries around me, I gotta say, I got a distance a mile long.
yeah.
Like I would struggle to have a tier of empathy for her because I've seen it in ways where the white woman wasn't even aware that she was using that in such a way that the focus went off of the true victim, which happened to be a Black woman, not me, another Black woman. The It's almost like a camera changing its focus from here to here. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, wait a minute. The person that's really bleeding out, I'm using an analogy. The person that's really been violated in this moment isn't even on the screen. You diverted the attention to you, and do you even realize you're doing it?
Oh, no way. No way that she realizes. No
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
exactly.
I've definitely cried because it just feels uncomfortable and painful um
Mm-hmm.
without
Mm-hmm.
an analysis necessarily of what that is kind of doing in the background. But I also
Yes,
think
yes.
that's a socialization again of for white women have been socialized as such to be empathetic and caring and sympathetic and in touch with their emotions, right? And so I think I do, yeah, a lot of that shit is so unconscious. Um, and how do you make that conscious? How do you create an awareness
Mm,
around it's okay to cry and feel pain? Like it's not that you can't do that. It's
right.
thinking about the circumstances in which that's happening and how that might be drawing the spotlight um, when another person who doesn't get
Mm-hmm.
to cry in the same way and doesn't get to have their pain acknowledged because you're now taking up all the space, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that has been
Mm-hmm.
a years long journey for me, I would say. Like, I don't know that it's something, I don't think you can just, I mean, maybe that's just me, but I don't know whether you can learn that overnight, right? Like, without a patient person really putting in the time. And then why
Mm-hmm.
would you put in the time, you
There
know?
you go. Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, and unlearning it again, that takes the labor of someone else saying, Lisa, this is the fifth time in a month that you've
Yeah.
cried when a person of color said, now, this is not Lisa, I'm just using you. But
Yeah.
as an
Yeah.
example, if this is the fifth time that Lisa's cried whenever a person of color has had an experience and the attention diverted to you, do you realize you're doing it? And the labor that I'm having to use
Yeah.
to point it out to you, who seems to be oblivious to doing it.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
usually the what I've heard as the response, and I'm not saying it's not a genuine response, but the socialized conditioned response is, well, I as a white woman have feelings too. And I'm like, yeah. However, the feelings and emotions and specifically
Mhm.
tears of white women have been used so long against Black people specifically. I mean, there was a long line of folks before Emmett Till, honey, that you
Yeah.
know, white tears and the cry of the white woman being used in illegitimate ways. So no, I'm not trying to hear no white tears at all. Um, but again, having not been confronted, that white woman may not be aware of the legacy that starts, moves through, and continues beyond Emmett Till. May not even have a clue. I mean, you
Yeah,
know,
and
the
yeah.
Rosewood story in Florida, we've brought that up many years ago on this podcast. There's so many times where white women used their emotions specifically and intentionally against Black people that even when it's not intentional, we don't trust it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in your example that you provided, the um handing of the tissue to the white woman who was crying
Yes.
versus keeping the focus on the Black woman who just explained her the violence that she had experienced, not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
physical violence,
Mm-hmm.
was just a reinforcement of that, right? There's and this
Yes.
there's this ahistoricism that's happening, and this just makes me very
Mm.
nervous about these ongoing attacks on education and African American history,
Yes.
which is just US history, right? But it's been
Yes.
excluded, and the ways in which we are supposed to be teaching quote unquote patriotic education per an executive order, and how if we continue to erase the experiences of Emmett Till and the thousands and thousands of other Black men in particular's experience at the hands of white women historically, then the degree to which white women will keep repeating these cycles is just going to increase because they are going to lack the education and the
Mm-hmm.
understanding of where that behavior sits in this long lineage
Yes.
of
Yes. Yes. Yes.
um even if you are, you're a crier, right? That's just who you are, right?
Right.
That doesn't
Right.
doesn't mean that there isn't a symbolism associated with that in the context of discussions around racism,
Yes,
right?
yes, 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 yes. Well, and you know, here we go once again, Lisa. We've talked about white comfort many times on this podcast.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
That education that is allowed and supported, the quote unquote patriotic education, is merely the education that is comfortable for white folks. It
mm-hmm.
has
Yes,
never been comfortable for non-white folks. And so we keep educating based on that comfort. So we can't be surprised that when someone's called to task to be uncomfortable, to have some self-reflection, they're like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? My entire education has been around very comfortable education until now. How are you, one Black woman, going to help me to unravel
right.
years of comfortable education?
Yep,
It's
yep.
not fair, and I'm not
Mm-mm.
even sure how possible it is. We can only do it,
Right.
you know, bit by bit, bit by bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So another ongoing conversation I think we need to stay vigilant on,
Yes.
particularly white women, thinking about the ways in which you can show up to be an ally and your
Mm-hmm.
responsibilities around that. And it's,
Yeah.
you're gonna trip up. I mean, I
Yeah.
do daily, right? Like, but it's the keeping moving forward and the not
Mm-hmm.
expecting others to teach you and to figure out some of this on your
Mm-hmm.
own, I think. But that
Mm-hmm.
centering of white comfort.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
because
That's right.
the level of discomfort you feel in this world is different to the level of discomfort I feel on this world in a daily basis. And
Oh, yeah, sure.
an
Yes.
assumption that we have
Yes.
that same experience is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. All right, let's get into phase three. And Lisa, let me just say that I have struggled to make sure that we at least try to end on a positive note on this podcast, because we realize that some of these topics are very challenging, much of which is current events too, that obviously
Yeah.
have been very challenging for folks. But phase three, I'm going to end on a happy note. So Lisa, I sent you a really cool video. Now, first of all, Lisa, my two loves in one video: diversity, equity, and inclusion, and food. Okay. Like you can't go
Yes,
wrong.
yes.
DEI and food, right? And so anyway, I
Mm-hmm.
sent you this video. Listeners, if you have not gone to follow on at least Instagram, but I think now still on TikTok, there is an account called the Dad Briefs, the Dad Briefs. And it is a gentleman, a white gentleman. His name is Slade Wentworth, Wentworth, Wentworth. And Slade Wentworth, this is like genius level fun, breaking down these concepts where imagine a world where no one had ever heard of diversity, equity, or inclusion, even from a scientific perspective of plants or flowers or animals, had no idea what diversity, equity, and inclusion was. And he posted this wonderful video where he is both explaining those concepts and he's pulling together this recipe that's like an instant noodle bowl recipe to make both the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as the moral and values case for this work. It even uses this acronym, Lisa. I know we've talked about DEI as an acronym. We've also talked about merit as well, but he specifically says that you have to be, uh, if you don't understand DEI, then you must be dummies with earned ignorance, right? Which just made me cackle, right? Because it's like, you understand DEI in every other realm of life other than humanity, human beings. You understand it in your garden outside. You understand it everywhere, but you don't want to understand it across humanity. And so he talks about this quote, recipe for human kindness. And then at the very end, Lisa, I just cackled when he said, be kind and wash your behind. I just cackled when I saw this video. But I just wanted to give a shout out to Slade for this video. And I've been checking out a few others. I've even sent some to my kids. And I just felt so grateful because, Lisa, I don't know about you, but countless times I have said, all right, white men that have power, when are you going to use your powers for good here? When are you going to use them? And I've run across this gentleman who clearly is. And so I want to give credit where credit is due because
Yeah.
I've been calling for it for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful. I know, Slade may feel like his work is like, one drop in an ocean of change that needs to happen, but I'm glad that's happening. He calls his account Food, Fun, and Fatherly Wisdom. And I just wanted to give him some appreciation on this podcast. Just phenomenal and grateful for your work. But Lisa, it was amazing. What did you think?
I really liked it. I thought maybe, there was this, or maybe there still is this kind of genre of videos, whether it's TikTok or Reels or something, where folks are doing something like they're putting makeup on or they're like
Yes.
building a Lego set or something, and that's the video. But what they're
Yes.
saying over the top of it is they're articulating this message, whether it be around reproductive rights or white privilege or pushing back against transphobia. And so there's this juxtaposition that's happening purposefully to
That's right. That's
not
right.
for the algorithms presumably, or to be disarming. And I thought that's where this video was going, like that he was making dinner while kind of like dropping the the nuggets, if you will. And but it wasn't like, he really tied it up very nicely around the ways in which this dish used ingredients from all over the world, and the perfect nature of the dish was derived from the diversity of the ingredients, right? And I thought it was a very powerful message, and just very calmly delivered too. I mean, I hope a lot of people are watching his work. I had not heard of him until you had sent me this video, but he made it seem,
Yeah, me
he
either.
just made
Yeah.
it seem pretty simple, right? Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
think this is not a happy note, but what I struggle with is the way that in which the diversity, equity, and inclusion as a term, or as three separate words, has been so
Mm.
maligned as to we are now, many of us are incapable of seeing its value. And if we were to abstract those concepts out of this political climate and cultural space, we would probably, more people would be like, sure, a diversity of opinion, right? Let's get a lot of different people with a lot of different
Oof,
ideas and
oof.
experiences, because that will make our ABC, whatever it is, better. And well, sure, I want my employees to feel included. Like, I want them to
Yeah.
be happy working here and that they feel like they have a place and that they have value, inclusion. And sure, I want to make sure that everyone
Mm-hmm.
is, being treated equally, even though I know that's not equity, but like that's a starting point,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And
yes,
so I
yes,
think
yes.
about
Mm-hmm.
like, so I feel like he just did a really great job of kind of bringing that home through food. And I hope that there are more
Mm-hmm.
creators out there doing that. I imagine they are. And I
Yeah.
do think this resistance or counter narrative is building, and it's building through folks like Slade Wentworth, right? Like, I'm seeing more of it
Yes,
now.
yes, yes. Mm-hmm. Well, I think so, Lisa, you just gave me this kind of visual analogy here of I feel like you're exactly right on kind of, you know, most people would agree with the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion before they had a jaded tagline that's only been used in the news, right? So,
Yeah.
and it reminds me of like, let's say, Lisa, I had never met you before, but you were out there doing your thing, Lisa. And similar to
Hmm.
our relationship when we first met each other and became friends, I didn't know you were out there.
Right.
Maybe someone's introduction was, well, she's kind of shady and she's done these things, and oh, well, she only wants to
Hmm.
highlight Black people and all these other things that are a negative introduction to Lisa. But then I decide to step over that negative introduction and say, you know what? I want to get to know Lisa for myself. Now, if she's trash after that, then okay, she is. But I want to get to know Lisa for myself because she may not be. I don't know yet. I haven't gone deep enough into the friendship to get to know her. But then I do spend time getting to know her, and I do spend more time with her to understand her. And I find out, wait a minute, y'all are tripping. Lisa's great. I don't know what y'all are talking about, but y'all gave me a bunch of foolishness that it's not true, and I'm not buying it. Lisa's great, right? I feel like that's what's happening to the entire country. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think for those of us who've been doing this for decades, it's like they didn't get the Slade Wentworth introduction. They
No.
didn't. They got the villain introduction first. And then those of us that have been doing this for years is like, wait a minute, we've been, the friend that you hadn't been introduced yet, we've been friends with you for a long time. You may not have known it, but we've been friends with you, entire
Mm,
country, you white women, you the disability community, you for years,
right.
decades. But because someone said something negative about us, you want to believe that first rather than getting to know
Yeah.
us. So you that have a parent in your life that needs a nursing or lactation room, all those people, we've been your friend, but you didn't know we were your friend.
Yeah. That's such a
Here
great
we
point about the,
are.
yeah.
Here we
Yep.
are.
The lactation space, right? I think there are these pockets of aha moments that are happening. Like,
Oh
oh,
yeah,
there
yeah,
was this
yeah.
funny Lauren Boebert meme. Lauren Boebert is a Colorado legislator that I am deeply ashamed comes from the state of Colorado, but she made some comment. It was a totally racist comment related to someone's accent, but she was commenting on how helpful and important it was to have subtitles on the screen. Someone had like put
The
a note under it being like,
hypocrisy.
product of DEI that you get to have subtitles so that you can understand a person with a strong accent, right?
Hello.
I mean,
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
yeah, I think that there is this, that's what I'm saying. I feel like there is this growing body of creative people on all the social medias kind of calling out the hypocrisy and the fact that, yeah, lactation spaces
Yes.
at NFL football games That's because women have been fighting for that, and that would fall under the category of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Hello, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Or even the koala changing tables that used to only be in women's bathrooms
Yes.
in
Yep.
public settings that
Yep.
are now in men's
Yep.
because men complained about, wait a minute, what if I'm not with my partner, assuming in, a heterosexual relationship. And so now I need someplace to go. So all these
Mm-hmm.
micro level things that improve our lives, watch them all get taken down one by one because you thought that DEI wasn't your friend. Here we
Exactly.
are.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you know what? Enough, y'all. So anyway, Lisa, I have found the YouTube clip of that video by Slade, and we can drop it in here. So hopefully, in the show notes, people get to see it and
Mm-hmm.
appreciate uh, its intellectual simplicity and all of that
Yeah.
because it just
Yeah.
makes it so accessible, and
It
I
does.
use
It
that pun
does.
intended, accessible. How about that? It's accessible in multiple ways on multiple levels.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just pretty profound. So very
Mm-hmm.
happy to see that type of work going on, Lisa. So
Great.
all right. Well, we have come down to the end of yet another episode. So, Lisa, let me tell folks where to find us. You certainly can find us, obviously, on YouTube at Unfazed Unedited, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. Of course, on Instagram at Unfazed Pod, LinkedIn at Unfazed Pod, or you can email us info@unfazedpodcast.com if you have questions, words of the week that you want defined for you, or any questions that you would like for us to try to answer. We have a website, unfazedpodcast.com, where you can access new and old shows. And Lisa, we are encroaching upon 200 episodes. So,
Yes.
can you believe that? Oh my gosh. So, if you like this week's episode,
Mm-hmm.
like, subscribe, leave a review, share with friends, coworkers, or others in this phase of your life. So, Lisa, until next time.
All right. See you next week.